Hi, I'm Todd Peterson with One Identity. Today we're going to do a little presentation called Security Starts Here. We're going to figure out what here actually is and then ways to achieve security through this here thing. So to start off with, let's actually define what security is. I would say from an IT standpoint, security is about getting a bunch of stuff right. The things that you need to get right are make sure that the right people have the right access to the right things. Now that could be Active Directory, it could be Azure Active Directory, it could be any number of apps on-prem in the cloud, it could be servers like Unix and Linux, whatever. But there's a lot of stuff that you have to have people with the right access to the right stuff. They need that access in the right time and in the right way. And the bottom line is you have to prove that all that access is right. So in other words, you have to be compliant with this access. So the right people, the right access to the right things at the right time in the right way, and you have to be able to prove that's all right. So the bottom line is, if you think about that, the real common denominator across all those things is that it's identity. So I would say that security starts with identity. So let's go to the next slide. So I'll just write ID here so we remember that that's what we're talking about. So there's a big difference between an identity and an account. Most people would assume that your account in Active Directory or your account in Salesforce or your account on a specific server is your identity. But there's more to it than that. Your identity is actually your digital representation of you. So a single source of the truth that would be who you are, and then that would translate into all the various accounts that you have access to. So I'd say identity is bigger than account. But let's talk a little bit about the difference between those and what actually happens with an account. So in order for you to access stuff in the right way, there's a few things that have to happen. You have to have a request, meaning somebody has to say, yeah, I want to give this person access to this thing. You have to have fulfillment, sometimes it's called provisioning. Somebody has to go in and actually set up you in that account. And when they set you up, they do it with the correct entitlements or permissions or role or whatever is used to decide what you can and can't do with that account that you've been granted on that specific system. And then somebody has to go in and do the certification to say that that was all done appropriately. So once all that happens, then you have access and, security can happen there. So let's walk through how this would happen with Active Directory. So new person's hired, somebody has to go in and request that the new person get their Active Directory account. Then that request is somehow gets to some guy in IT. He's going to go in and do the fulfillment or the provisioning to put you in the correct groups and all that stuff so that you can do it. And then as they do that, there should be some concept of entitlements. So what are the permissions, what are the rights that are associated with that account, so that what can you do, what can't you do within those. And then somebody's going to have to do the certification at some point to say, yeah, all that stuff happened correctly. So that's a pretty cumbersome process, especially in multiple systems. So in Active Directory, you dealt with the account. That could be considered the identity for that one thing. But now you have to do the same thing for Azure Active Directory. So you've got the exact same 4 things happening, but now it's on a different account. So you're still the same person, but your account is different. Same thing happens with SAP. Same thing happens with Azure Web Services. Same thing with Unix and Linux. Same thing with Workday. Same thing with ServiceNow. Same thing with everything that you've got. So you've got all these accounts that are being dealt with. These things have to happen: request, fulfillment, entitlements, and certification across all this stuff. And it's really disjointed, it's really a mess, and so that's where people run into trouble. That's where the risk, that's where the compliance troubles come in, because it's not consistent. But we haven't even talked about the privileged accounts. Every single one of these systems has a privileged account associated with it. Every one of those privileged accounts is probably going to be used by an individual that has an identity. So you've again got this disconnect between the identity and the account that's going to cause you more trouble. So let's talk about how you could actually overcome this problem with basing things on identity. So let's assume that we have decided there is an authoritative source, there is a single identity. There's some place where that concept of you are a person and this person has access to multiple things exists. We could say it's the HR system. It could be Active Directory in some cases. It could be some other directory. Bottom line is there's a single identity. Imagine that identity is sitting there behind all of the accounts that you have based on. So you're going to do a thing called identity correlation. Basically what you've done is you said that all of these accounts are tied to the identity, they're not individual islands unto themselves. So correlating the identities gives you a single source of truth for entitlements. You can now much more easily set up the idea of a person in a specific job role has these entitlements, and how do those entitlements apply in AD, or how do they apply in Azure AD, how do they apply in AWS or Google or whatever. So those entitlements can be perpetuated out to the number of things that have to happen. That then gives you the ability to unify that repetitive process we talked about earlier of request, fulfillment, and certification. That's a concept called identity governance and administration, or IGA. So all those things that have to happen, somebody needs to make a request, somebody needs to fulfill and do provisioning, somebody needs to do certification, everything involved in making sure that all that stuff happens right. If you can base everything on a single concept of identity, correlate all of the accounts so that now you have this single source of the truth, it makes the process of doing request, fulfillment, and certification much, much easier. But what about the privileged accounts? So most people implement what's called a PAM solution, Privileged Access Management. It's basically designed to control the uncontrollable nature of a privileged account. They have all power, they have all permissions, they're anonymous, and so you need to be able to do things to make that much more, that access controlled in a much better manner. That's what a PAM solution will do. So combining the IGA capabilities of request, fulfillment, and certification with the PAM capabilities of making sure that those things are used in the appropriate way is going to give you a full circle. So the bottom line is that with your PAM stuff, you want to correlate identity as well. You're going to switch from the concept of privileged accounts to privileged identity. It's no longer you have 50 different privileged accounts. You have a single person or a set of people that have access to those accounts. That allows you to unify privileged entitlements, and it makes it much easier to put IGA functions for your privileged access management deployment. So bottom line is, if you can correlate identities, take care of unifying those IGA functions, and tie them to your PAM functions, you're going to be a lot better off. So let's talk about how this actually happens. So I would say security starts with one identity, because we're the only vendor that offers the correct way to do all this stuff across the board. So here's a much cleaner version of that diagram. Let's talk about how it works in the AD environment. Let's say that you're not equipped to do a full IGA solution, which they're available, but they're a little more complex and they could be expensive for some people. And you're not equipped to do a full PAM implementation yet. But you can solve a lot of those problems by basing your things on AD. So maybe you're going to implement an Active Directory account management solution that's going to allow you to do the provisioning, do the workflows, everything you need to get that access right. That will also introduce you into the PAM area because you're able to delegate the AD and Azure AD admin to do only the things that they're allowed to do. Then you can augment it with things like connectors to additional systems so that it now embraces other things. Access request and access certification delivered from the cloud, so that you get more of this IGA functionality there. And then that can also apply to PAM when you decide to do that. So the bottom line is that what you get in this unified, correlated approach to identity-based security, not account-based security, is IGA and PAM are based on the identity and not the account. Entitlements are much easier to get right. There's no more guesswork. It's all based on the appropriate things the business can be in control. You can build towards full or as limited of an IGA approach as you need. You can do everything you need to do, or you can do just the few things that are most important to you right now, and you can build over time. Security obviously improves because now you know who has access to what, that access is controlled, that access is right. Removes human error. Now you don't have 20 different processes by 10 different guys in IT using 10 different tools to make this stuff happen. It's a single unified approach that's going to do it all at once, single workflows, single approvals, single set of entitlements, etc. And that then makes compliance much easier. The ability to certify that that access is correct is simplified dramatically just by the fact that you've correlated the identities, that you've condensed workloads, and you've moved this haphazard approach out of the way. So bottom line is, if you can base security on identity, and if one identity can help you, you'll be much better off. So security starts with one identity. So if you want to learn more, come visit us at oneidentity.com. We can talk about all of these things, help you get to where you need to go. Thanks.